Okay, for this next section, we're going to talk a little bit more about specific things that are happening within these transformations that we've been going over the last couple of days. So, yesterday we talked about what a reflection is versus a rotation versus a translation. And we kind of just kept it really brief where we said that they keep the same shape and they keep the same size. But today I want to go over some of these other characteristics that are going to happen every single time that you do a reflection or a rotation or a translation. And they're just things that we want you to be aware of so that when you're looking at something, you can make more sense of the picture that you see. So the first thing I want to go over is something called orientation, because some of these questions are going to ask about orientation on a shape. And what orientation means is that it is the order of the points. Order of the points means how they go around the shape. And when you do that, you want to be consistent. So if I had two triangles here, and I'm just labeling them with letters. If I was going to start at A and I was going to go clockwise around my shape and go to C and then go clockwise to B and then back up to A, I would want to make sure I do the same thing on the second one as well when I'm checking its orientation. So that would mean I start at D and I go clockwise to F, clockwise to E, and back up to D. It doesn't mean you have to go clockwise. You could go counterclockwise if you want to. But the important thing that you're doing is that you're going in the same direction when you're checking on orientation. So let's get into reflection characteristics first. So you can see there's a picture over here where they have triangle ABC and A prime, B prime, C prime. And it's obvious that there's been some kind of reflection that has happened. This line here we talked about the other day is called that line of reflection. And so that's the line that they used when they did this, when they actually flipped that triangle over. You can also see, we've seen kind of these symbols before. They've got like 2 dashes here, 2 dashes here. They've got 1 here, 1 here, and 3 here, 3 here. If you remember when we talked about that in the last unit, that is symbolizing to you that those distances are the same. So they're just showing you that the distance from A to the line and A prime to the line of reflection is the same. And the same thing's happening with B and B prime, C and C prime. Okay, so I'm just going to get those out of there. I just wanted to point that out to you. So now let's start answering some of these questions. So number 1 says, when you're reflecting, do some points on the shape move further than others? So kind of go back to what we just talked about there with those markings. If some of these markings are differently marked, like you've got some that have 2, there's one that has 1, there's another one that has 3. If my line of reflection is here where M is, they're basically asking you, does C have to move farther than B does or than A? And if you kind of look, so you can see on a shape like this, when you are reflecting, and we kind of talked about this yesterday too, when I was giving the example of when you guys look in the mirror, if you stand closer to the mirror, your reflection is closer. And then if you back away from the mirror, your reflection gets farther away too. So if you're closer to the line of reflection, you're going to have less distance to cover as far as when you have to move over to the other side. So when we answer this question, we're going to say yes. Some points will move farther than others. And the reason why is because the closer to the line of reflection, the less a point is going to have to move. And like I said up here, if you follow the distance from like A to the line and B to the line, B is significantly shorter than that. And so it's not going to have to move as far because B is closer to the line of reflection. The second question asks, does orientation change? So remember we talked about orientation, the order of the points. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit up here. And let's say that I want to start at point A, and I'm going to go clockwise around my shape. So I'm going to go A to B to C and back. And what I like to do is on my pre-image, I just like to list out the letters that I hit as I went through that. So I said I started at A, I went to B, and I went to C, and then I went back to A. Now, if we check that on the image, so the image would be starting over here at A prime, does it do the same thing? So if I start at A prime and I go clockwise, does the order stay the same or does it change? Well, if we start at A prime and we go clockwise, we would go to C prime and then B prime. So did the order of the letters change there? Yes. So orientation does change when you have reflections. And again, that's partly because everything gets backwards on a reflection. So it makes sense that the letters would be in a different order. Now the third question says, can you reflect an object and have points that don't move? If so, where are they located? I want you to think about that for a second. Can you think of an example of when you would maybe reflect something, or maybe you saw something on the homework from yesterday? Is there a time when you reflect something and it doesn't move? Think about if this is my line of reflection, and if I had a shape that looked like this. Okay, I know they don't look perfectly the same, but you understand what I'm trying to show here. That point that's on the line of reflection, is that point going to move? No, it's not going to move at all. It's going to stay right there on that line of reflection because it's sitting on the line of reflection. So a point doesn't have to move. So to answer this question, can you reflect an object and have points that don't move? Yes, but they have to be on the line of reflection in order for that to happen. Okay, we're going to answer these same three questions now for rotations and for translations. So hopefully now you kind of understand how you should be looking at the pictures and kind of what I mean when I ask these questions. Okay, so if we look at rotations next. Okay, we're kind of switching our picture up here. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in on this for a second. So we're dealing with that triangle ABC. And we're rotating it to A prime, B prime, C prime. Okay, so you can kind of see everything went this direction, it looks like, so it's kind of moving that counterclockwise. And they're going to ask us the same three questions here. So starting with question number 1, when rotating, do some points on the shape move further than others? So think about this picture up here. I'm going to go back in on it for a second. This point here in the center, like where they have that O, that's called the center of rotation. Okay, so that's the point that they're rotating around. So they took ABC and they moved it all in relation to that point O down there. So I just want you kind of to track with me here. If I follow the distance from C to C prime, it kind of follows like this arc right here. And then B to B prime goes here. And A to A prime follows that one. So I kind of trace those pathways that those points took. Are any of those arcs longer than others in the picture? I mean, A to A prime is a lot longer than C to C prime. So it is possible that points are going to have to move farther than others. So down here, I'm going to go ahead and say yes. There will be some points that move farther than others. Okay, but how do you know when ones are going to move farther or ones are going to have a shorter distance to move? Well, look at how those points are related to that center. Which point was closest to the center of rotation? C was. Okay, so since C is closer to the center of rotation, it's going to have a smaller distance to travel when you do a rotation. A is farther away from the center of rotation, so it's going to have to move a lot longer. So the closer you are to the center of rotation, the less a point will move. Rotation characteristics, going on to number 2 here, does orientation change? So if I come back up here to my picture, this is when we're checking order of points, okay? So for my pre-image, I'm gonna start at A, and let's just do what we did before. Let's go clockwise. So to B, to C, back up to A. So I started at A, it went to B, it went to C. Now let's do the same thing for image. So you guys take a look at the image there and write down, again, starting at the same initial point and go in the same direction, write down the order of points that you hit. So if you start at A prime, because I started at A, so I have to start at A prime, and I go clockwise, you should have gone to B prime next, and then you should have hit in C prime. Did the order of those letters change? No, not this time. So for rotations, the orientation will not change. The order of the points should still be in the same order for both situations. Okay, number 3, can you rotate an object and have points that don't move? If so, where are they located? So again, think about this. The closer you are to the center, the less distance you have to move. So what would happen if we had a point that was on the center of rotation? If it's on the center, it's not going to have anywhere to go. It's just going to stay on the center of rotation. So can we rotate an object and have points that don't move? Yes. If so, where is it at? Well, it would have to be on the center of rotation. So again, think about if I had my center point here and I had a triangle with that point on there and I rotated it around, that point would stay there if this was maybe moved to there. But that one point that's on that center isn't going to move. That's going to kind of just be connected and it's going to continue to just stay in that spot. Okay, so we've done reflections, we've done rotations. The last one we have to do here is translations, and we have the same 3 questions here. And we've got a new set of shapes. We've got triangle ABC and A prime, B prime, C prime. So I want you guys to take like a couple minutes here, and I want you to maybe just read through those, and I want you to just right now write down your initial thoughts. We've already done rotations and reflections, so let's see what you can do with translations. All right, let's talk about this, and hopefully we all have answers down, and hopefully you didn't get tricked up too much by translations here. So the first question is, when you're translating, do some points on the shape move further than others? Think about it like this. If you were to connect A to A prime, and B to B prime, and C to C prime, do any of those arrows look longer than the others? And it might be kind of hard to tell just because of how far away it is here on the screen. But these look like they're about the same distance. And maybe even like with your fingers right now, connect A to A prime and move that same setting down to B and B prime, and it should match. And same with C and C prime. So remember with the translation, you're sliding it across the graph. So if something, like think about it like this, if I'm sitting right here and someone were to come at me from the side and tackle me in my chair, okay, all of me would go. Like my feet aren't going to stay here and the rest of me is going to go. That's not going to happen. Like all of me is going to go in one direction, okay? So when you think about when you're translating something, when you're pushing something around on the graph, everything is going to move with it. It's not just going to have something stay and everything else is going to go, because then you would be stretching the shape because something is going to be staying here while the rest of it gets pushed in a different direction. So you should have said no for this first one. All points are going to have to move the same distance when you're dealing with the translation. Number 2, does orientation change? If you checked it for your pre-image, if you start at A and you do what we did before, you go clockwise, you should have hit B and then C. And then for your image, if you start at A prime and you go the same direction, you should have hit B prime and then C prime. So no, orientation will not change for a translation either. And then 3, can you translate an object and have points that don't move? Well, again, think about what I just said. If something were to push me out of my chair, my feet aren't going to stay in their position. My feet are going to go with the rest of my body. Okay, so everything is going to move. Something is not going to be stuck in that place. That's not a translation anymore. So this one should have also been no. So hopefully that didn't trick you too much, just because all the other ones we had yeses for pretty much everything except for the number 2 on rotations. But translations are a little bit different in that everything on that shape is going to move the same amount. Everything's going to be moving, but we still had a no there for its orientation like we did with a rotation.